Good morning and welcome to Quantum Love Radio on CKLU 96.7 FM. I'm your host, Miranda Rocca-Circelli, and today I have Justine Giles with me as my guest. Welcome, Justine.
Thank you.
Justine is mostly known as a singer-songwriter, but I know she's multi-talented, and we'll probably get into different talents that she has today. So I always start off with asking my guests, what are you up to? What are you doing? What are you doing that you're passionate about right now in life? And maybe you can tell me and our viewers a little bit about yourself.
Awesome. It's always so hard to even start because, I feel like everything that I do is something I'm passionate about. That's just who I am and what I'm all about. So, let's just start from the beginning, I guess, which is my album. I released my first independent album in September, so I guess 2 months ago, and we had a big CD release party. That was awesome, and I knew that had to come out, and I worked on it for years, so I knew that I couldn't really take my music career any further and leave and travel and tour until the CD was done. So the CD is done, and people can find that on iTunes just by typing in my name, and so they can do that, which is super cool. And I'm actually off to Montreal in less than 2 weeks from now, and I get to basically showcase my music and play for a new crowd and record labels and all this stuff. So that's the biggest thing on my plate right now.
That's pretty big.
Yeah.
I have to say, that's pretty cool. So now, what kind of songs or what kind of genre of music do you kind of focus on?
I always say folk pop, and I don't know why, but that's just what I say. That's always what I feel. But you know what? It really does change per song. Like, I don't really try to write geared to a certain audience or geared to a certain genre. It always just kind of comes naturally. So there's some songs that may sound a bit more country, or they may have a hint of reggae, or it's kind of just open. It's open to interpretation as well.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So when did you realize that you had this really cool talent? Around what age? And when did you start kind of harnessing that and finding out, what genre you'd like to sing? Like, how does that whole process happen for someone?
For me, like I said, it's all been very natural. And I love that question because I've been thinking about it a lot lately. And literally when I was 3 or 4, I was always performing on stage, like singing songs, running around, talking about whatever was around me, singing about whatever was around me. So it's always just been like a natural way for me to, I guess, process my surroundings. And I was very, very fortunate to go to a school where, even in elementary school, where we had plays all the time. It was an annual thing and sometimes even more frequent than that. So I was always honing my craft, and I always knew that I loved to entertain, and I was always very comfortable in front of a huge crowd. So that started very young, and went into high school. I went to Sudbury Secondary, so again, honing my craft. I do visual art as well, so I started with that as a major, and then I switched over to vocals and got back into performing on stage. And yeah, so it's just been a natural thing for me, and I think, again, just letting it flow, because I never really sat down and said, okay, well, I'm just going to start writing and gear this to a certain audience. It was very natural, and it's definitely a part of a healing process for me as well. That's how I kind of deal with my life is through writing, and then comes through song.
So you kind of listen to yourself intuitively in terms of, like you say, you don't write for anyone in particular. If you're feeling a certain genre is just coming through, then that's just kind of what you go with.
Yeah, exactly. And what amazes me is that it's able to resonate with so many people without, I don't want to say without the intention. Obviously, I write from a very pure place, and I think that in my music I'm very vulnerable, and I think that people relate to that when I'm talking about my own experiences, which I think is phenomenal. But I don't think I would ever be able to sit down and say, well, my intention is to connect with all these people and to have to put myself in a place where I don't resonate. Mm-hmm. That doesn't really jive with me. Like, it just so happens to work where I'm, kind of I guess, guided to write whatever it is that I need to write for my own healing, and in turn that helps people along their healing journey as well.
No, totally. And I always say that, you can always learn from other people's experiences. And that's what I hope. I mean, I get a lot of that, and that's how I've kind of, healed myself and uncovered my passions and kind of found my own journey was in just hearing other people's experiences, good and bad, because I think there's greatness from all of that.
Yeah.
So I think it's really cool that you turn that into music, because I think, and of course, there's tons of studies out there, and the consensus is always that music heals. So the fact that your music is, your intention is, for your own personal healing, I think that almost has a tenfold healing factor to it, because that's the main intention, and that's one of the main purposes of music without people realizing it. Kind of a hidden intention too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it makes me feel like a powerhouse, and that's the energy that I feel every time that I step on stage. It's a powerful feeling, even if you're expressing an old vulnerable song where maybe you were at a very different point than where you are now. It still feels like a very powerful state to be in.
That's a good thing that you brought up, because do you find that when you sing a song that maybe you wrote at a different point in your life, when you're singing it, because I'm sure it starts to bring up all the old emotions you had in that experience. So do you find that that helps your healing process, or does it put you back in time? How does that sit with you?
It varies per song.
Okay.
And I think some songs I can sing it and I kind of get this vision in my mind of where I was and what I was going through at that time, and I can see the growth and I can see how far I've come. So in that way it's very healing. But then there's some songs where I will have that happen again, and I'll know when I wrote it and what I was going through, and it may be coming back up in my life for review, or maybe I had repeated a pattern, or maybe something had happened more than once and I'm like, oh, that's maybe not a good thing if I can be in the same exact place where I was before. But at the same time, they I've heard this analogy and I really like it, where it's just talking about healing is like an onion, where you're just you're peeling layers and layers and layers, and you'll never be back at square one, essentially, because even though I can relate to something I wrote 4 years ago, a lot has happened in that time. So even it's not that I'm going back in time to that one painful experience. I think if I feel what I was feeling back then, I have more...
You have more tools that can help you through it, almost like personal health, healing tools and things like that, because you've grown in essence, right? Do you find it? So do you just kind of when you're playing for people? It's funny that you mentioned a few things. If you're requested to play a certain song, do you feel that? If that is, let's say, a song from your past, do you feel like, oh, okay, obviously I need to sing this for a particular healing purpose, whether it's your own or other people. It's kind of like, tossing a coin, and you kind of just let the songs, whatever songs you feel you need to sing, then they kind of, or that are requested, you kind of just go with that flow.
Exactly, and that's exactly it. It's for my healing, but it's also for someone else's, because... Say, even for example, a song that I don't typically bring on stage, for some reason, if I feel that it needs to come out that night, and it will, guaranteed there's someone that needed to hear that song and that resonates with that song. And even with releasing my album, it's funny to me that everyone has a different favorite song, and people resonate with so many different songs. And I think I had the idea or belief that people would gravitate towards one or two main songs, that maybe are the singles, or the more popular songs, or that the songs that always went over really well at shows. And everyone honestly resonates with a different song for a different reason. And I think it's awesome that it's open to interpretation, like I said. So everyone takes a different feeling and experience from it, which is super cool.
I just love the fact that, on my show and in my personal life, I always, talk about listening to your intuition and letting that guide you, whether it's in everyday decisions, whatever it is, it's that gut feeling that says turn right, not left. And you've been able to bring that into your music, which you should, right? Because, again, that intuition should guide people in every aspect of their life. But I love that you're so open about, discussing how that's what guides you in your writing, in your performances, in every aspect of that. Do you feel that Was there a time when you didn't listen to that intuition and you were just starting out your journey as a singer-songwriter? And how did that work out?
Totally. I think we've all had moments where we didn't listen to ourselves. And I think over this past year, I've had to trust myself more than I ever have. More so over the past few months, because even my journey to Montreal is totally intuitively guided. Like, that's the only reason why it's happening and why that manifests is because I trusted myself. And I think to a lot of people, like, it may kind of seem a little crazy to take a big leap like that, but I just feel so guided, and I just do whatever feels right, and that's all it comes down to, like, at the end of the day. And I think I've done a lot of work on trusting myself, and it's never let me down.
No, I totally hear you, and actually I just got chills when you said that. So, I think the best way for people who maybe they're out of touch with their intuition, I think the best way to explain it is in saying that when you follow your intuition, you feel good. I mean, you're a little hesitant at first because you're like, I don't know, like, is this just me thinking, craziness, or am I losing it? Do I listen to this? And sometimes it takes us out of our comfort zone. And that's hard for people.
Yeah.
Because the unknown is probably what, where fear and negative emotions sometimes manifest out of conditioning that we've, do what you're used to.
Yeah, exactly.
Is what we're taught, right? But when you listen to that intuition, the result of that is good feelings. And however that is, whether it's excitement, happiness, love, whatever it is, I think that you just feel good when you're like, okay, I'm going to listen to myself. I'm going to, turn right, for lack of other examples, instead of left. And, something good comes out of that. And I think that's probably the best way, to express to people how they need to listen to their intuition, that only good comes out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also want to mention that fear will always come up, even if you're, following your path and following your intuition, because I think the closer you get to what you want, the more, like, fear comes up and tries to stop you. Your ego will totally try to interrupt you, like, right before the miracle happens or right before a big shift happens. Mm-hmm. Because it senses change, and it senses that you're moving forward, and your mind and your ego and your fear will try to, make it seem really appealing for you to keep playing it smaller, to go back. Mm-hmm. And what I've seen lately is that, that's very human for that to come up. But at the end of the day, like, you will always know what to do. You'll always be shown signs, and it'll just keep working out. So I don't want people to feel that, it's like fear isn't going to come up when you start following your dreams and passions, because it will. Like, it
totally will, yeah.
That even happens with me. When things start becoming real, and when things start really showing up, I think even in the physical, like when I was planning my trip, for example, I was, feeling that it was very on path and on track for me. But when it came to the logistics, like booking a place to stay and booking a plane ticket, that's when my mind is like, oh my God, this is real, and that's when all the fear starts to come up, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just stuff that you have to work through, and I think that, I don't know, I think that's where you find your strength, though, is when you work through it. And yeah,
I think you have a good example, because you're right, and I've realized this in shifts in my life, right before that big, I'll call it, result or outcome, for lack of better terms, is just about to manifest, or it's in the process of manifesting. And yeah, the little pieces you get caught on, something feels like it's pulling you back, where you get scared and you're saying, do I do this? But it feels so good, but do I do this? And you get caught on that, and I do believe you're right. It's just it's the old conditioning that the unknown can be scary, but that's where you have to push through it, because it's almost this superficial fear. It's not a real fear.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Almost like it's just this little roadblock that you just have to drive around, and then the outcome is just magical, and especially when you can sit there and say, you know what? Yeah, I was a little scared, but I pushed through, and look what happened. And I think that's really hard, because a lot of people sit there and they get caught on that fear, and then they run back. It's so funny. I have kids, so I'm thinking of this movie, The Crows, and it's about cavemen. It's a cartoon. Obviously, it's like an animated. And it's so funny, they live in this cave, and that was the thing, is that, the dad always teaches them, you got to be in the cave this time, don't look at anything, like, they're scared of everything, right? Until, the daughter starts to explore, and it's like, it's crazy because it's the unknown, right? It's such a funny paradox. It's just, like, so funny.
I think, too, that when you're fully meant to move forward, it'll always work itself out, and I think you can keep running back, like, into that cave as much as you want, but when it's really time for you to go and move forward, it'll just happen. And I think I've known for a really long time that, I want to travel, and I want to tour, and I want to meet new people, and not just with music, but also in terms of, like, public speaking or having an impact on people in a positive way. So I've known that this is part of my path for a long time, but timing is a huge thing, and it is a huge factor. But literally over the past few months, I've had so many things kind of fall away in my life here, my day-to-day life. And that just shows me that it's safe for me to move forward, because there's nothing for me to fall back on. And even though that may be a scary concept, it just shows me that I'm ready to move forward, because I can't go back to my past ways anymore. It's just not an option.
It's so true, because, it's so funny, too, because that cave in that movie just collapses. So they have no choice but to now evolve and move ahead into new land and new territory, right? Which is a scary thing that's so funny. I have to watch that movie again. That's so funny.
Sounds like I should be watching
Yeah, it's called The Crows. It's actually really good. But now it puts it into even a greater perspective for me.
Yeah.
But it's true. It's that you can hide for so long, but eventually there's nothing to go back to. And you're right, for some people that could be scary. And, a little, it could be intimidating, because you're thinking, there's nothing to go back to, but I'm scared about what's ahead. And so you're kind of stuck in this limbo for just a little bit of time until you realize, well, you know what? It's kind of like once your back's against the wall, there's nowhere, you can't go any further, and you have to go forward.
Yeah.
And I think in those moments when you do go forward, that's when the greatest personal evolution almost occurs, because you uncover things about yourself that you didn't realize you could do. You uncover different passions that maybe you had to uncover in order to get to that next step. And you just grow. And it's so magical.
It really is. And I think I've been in that limbo, so I know how difficult it is to kind of persevere and push through. But I think the positive is, if you can't go back to who you were in the past, and even if you aren't sure of who you are right now, I think that's such a good thing, because that means that you're creating someone new, and the person that you are right now is someone you haven't been before. And I think that's so great, because we often compare ourselves to who we were, and even what we used to look like, or how we used to dress, or how our hair used to be. And it's silly, but it's true. Like, we identify with these things, and for me, everything has literally been different. And I was like, you know what? I think it's such a good thing to not know all the answers, and to just trust that I am where I need to be, and I will always be where I need to be, and I'll go where I need to go. And so I'm kind of slowly exiting that limbo.
It's really hard to have trust in that, because I find, and it's only through that unwavering faith of knowing, it will work out the way it needs to for my greatest happiness, and, in your greatest happiness, the people around you always benefit.
Yes.
And I've learned that, when situations happen, and this is not only from experiencing, the good and the bad of it, of kind of being consumed by whatever you're experiencing in your life at that point in time, appearing to be bad, and kind of getting consumed in that, and then eventually coming out of that and realizing that had to happen for all this goodness to happen. And that's really hard, because you can see how easy it is to just start kind of dwelling and festering in what's before you, instead of accepting it and almost, giving it love and saying, I accept you, and whatever this is, because I know it has to happen for my happiness to be as good as it can be. So now when situations kind of happen where you're sitting there, well, the old me, as you said, as you've evolved, the old me would have looked at this and said, oh, this really sucks, and then now the new me is kind of like, meh, it's got to happen. So it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. Yeah. And I know it is because something good is coming out of it. And that's really the only way to look at it. And sometimes, you feel there are missed opportunities or whatever it is, but, that's not the case, because when you just kind of let it, accept it, and know that it is what it is, then it's almost like right around the corner is something amazing, and you're just kind of like, wow, I'm so happy I didn't get caught on that moment, because all this goodness was just right there waiting to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I think it does stem down to acceptance, and acceptance of self, and acceptance, because that's what the root of it all is. But it is tough sometimes to accept what's going on around you, especially when it's so different from what you've ever experienced in the past. And accepting goodness for yourself, and accepting that you're worthy of happiness and abundance, and to live a life of, you know, your dreams and your passions, because we all do deserve that. And I think sometimes it can feel that that's not destined for you, or that's not meant for you, or, you know, people will feel that, oh, that's only meant for her and not for me.
Totally.
And it's not the case at all. You know, it all, I think, comes down to your accepting of receiving it. And that's actually super hard, as we were talking about earlier.
So hard.
The balance of giving and receiving. But that's really what it comes down to, is accepting where you are presently, and trusting that not only is that where you're meant to be and it's benefiting you and your path, but it's also helping so many people around you that you don't even know.
And that's you know, we're conditioned to believe that, you know, if you don't see it, then you can't believe it. And the reality is there's so much going on at such great scales, you know, and I'm talking, you know, cosmic scale, that you have no idea the effect that you're putting out. And you know, we've always talked about this on my show about, you know, everything is energy. And so you can't see the air you breathe, but you know it's there, or you wouldn't be alive, right? So you kind of have to have that unwavering faith that whatever you're doing, you know, yes, it's good for you. And in being good for you, that positive energy is just, you know, projected out into the universe. And it comes back to you. And so it's just that constant kind of cyclic, you know, always do things that are in your greatest good, you know. And that's where serving yourself is important at that level, where you need to put yourself before other people. Because if you're doing what's making you happy, without obviously ever hurting anyone or anything like that, that, you know, you're helping other people along their journey as well, because that energy is just abundantly flowing in and out of you. So I think that that's really cool. So what we'll do is we'll take a really quick break. Again, my guest is Justine Giles, and we're having a great chat about, really, life.
Yeah.
So we'll be right back with Quantum Love. Good morning, and you're back with Quantum Love Radio on CKLU 96.7 FM. I'm your host, Miranda Rocca-Circelli, and this morning I have my fabulous guest, Justine Giles. So we have been talking about her personal journey with music and really with life, which has been, I always find it so interesting to hear people's journeys, and just, especially when I find, you know, there's so much that I get to learn from other people, and there's, you know, likeliness and decisions I've made, and kind of things that have encouraged me along my path. And I just, again, love that you have used your intuition when it comes to songwriting and decisions about your next step with your music. So here's a question. This might be a challenging one for you.
Okay.
You know, why didn't you publish or release a CD, you know, years ago? So I know that might be a tough question, and I'm asking it because I'm sure a lot of people who are at a point in their life where they're thinking, you know, why didn't I do this before? Maybe you can shed light on, you know, the reasons why you haven't done this earlier.
Yeah, literally, it's literally because, like, the only thing that's coming to me right now is that it honestly wasn't the divine time. Like, it just wasn't the right time, because I actually did want to release my first CD long before it actually came out. And that was frustrating in a lot of ways, because I wanted it to be out and done, and I wanted to move forward, and I wanted to do whatever. I didn't even know what I wanted probably at the time, which is maybe why too, because I didn't have any clarity as to where I wanted to go and when I wanted to go, or where I wanted to travel, or what I wanted to work on after my album. I didn't have that clarity maybe a year ago, when I wanted it to be done and out, and that's something I just had to deal with, is like the challenge of working with people on this album, and they have day jobs and kids, and, you know, like trying to find a balance between studio time and life, essentially. And that was kind of a struggle for me, because before I released my CD, I was just recording my own demos by myself. And so that was all on my time. And that's how the demo process works. Like, you just kind of do your own thing, or that's how it works for me anyway. I can just sit down and record in my bedroom if I really want to, the main idea of a song, and, you know, that's it. Like, it's simple, it's done, like, I can mix it pretty well. It's not the same quality as my album by any means, but at least it's, you know, it's done, it's out there, and it's ready to be moved to the next stage to, like, go professionally record it. So it was interesting for me to work in a studio and to work with other people, because it's a totally different ball game, essentially. So, yeah, to answer your question, like, I just honestly feel that everything has to happen at the right time, and that's a hard thing to trust in, because sometimes you think that your time is the right time, and, you know, sometimes you're just shown otherwise, and you just have to trust that that's for a reason.
And that's exactly what I wanted you to say. Not that I'm trying to, like, impose anything on you, but
it's true.
It's true, because, you know, for me personally, again, and this is where I say there's a lot of likeliness I find with meeting with my guests, which is awesome, because it confirms for me that, okay, you know, you were on the right path that you need to be on. But that was exactly it, where, you know, there are times in your life where you feel like, as you said, you know, you want things to happen on your time, but you don't realize that there's a greater, you know, if it happened when you wanted it to happen, it wouldn't be as good as it is when it does actually manifest in the time it needs to manifest. And I think a lot of times you beat yourself up over that, where you're thinking, why isn't this happening? Why isn't this happening? I want it to happen today. And it could happen, you know, months, years. Like, you don't know the timeline, but you have to trust that when it's meant to be everything it needs to be for your greater good, it will happen then when it needs to. And that's really hard. Is patience? It is. It's hard.
Well, trust me, I am the queen of trying to force things to happen sometimes. And, like, that, I'm guilty of it. Like, I really am, in terms of trying to make things happen on my schedule from my limited perspective here, right?
Yeah.
Like, whether it's with my music, with any project, with relationships, with making things just work the way I want them to right now. And it's like, you just can't. Rome wasn't built in a day. You know, and it's cliche, but it's true. Like, you can't do everything in one day, and not everything is meant to happen today. And you just really have to surrender and trust and let go.
To do,
And it is, and it's a practice. I think some days are easier than others.
But then I find what happens is when things do manifest, and you see them materialize before you, then it kind of builds, it's cumulative, right? It builds that trust where you're thinking, wow, if this would have happened at any other point in time, it wouldn't be what it is. And so now I know I want something to happen today, but I know that it will happen. I don't know when, I don't know how, and that's the hardest part. You don't have the details. And I find as soon as you try to figure it out and you think, oh, this is how I think it's going to manifest, or this is how, you know, it's going to appear before me, it's like it always takes a twist and it happens some completely different way. So I find even in trying to predict when and how whatever it is you want to come to you, you can't. You cannot, but it will always be amazing when it does come to you.
Yeah, you really have to let go of control. And what I personally experienced this year more than ever is, you know, you'll get the insights and you won't get it all at once. Like, I feel like especially building up to releasing my album and going to Montreal, it's been coming to me, but very, like, slowly in spurts over the course of the year. So, like, oh, this is what you need to know. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do with that and what that means. But it all builds up so you have enough trust to move forward. And what I find is beautiful and magical about it is that you'll be kind of shown or intuitively guided enough to trust, but there's still enough of the unknown so that you live presently. Because I feel like there's a mix of knowing and there's also a mix of not knowing, and it has to be that way so you can live it.
It's so true, because if you knew it was going to happen tomorrow, you'd be focusing on tomorrow as opposed to just taking in the beauty of today with whatever little pieces you have of that puzzle in that moment. And that's hard to do too. So I find, you know, the challenge, of course, is always, you know, having that unwavering faith and trusting what you want will materialize before you, and trusting you can't predict how and you can't predict when. And that is so hard, because like you said, you know, there's times where you feel that you need it. You absolutely need it to make it through the day, but you have enough with you to make it through the day, because they're building blocks to get to where you need to be. And of course, it wouldn't be such a beautiful journey if you knew it was going to happen tomorrow.
Right.
And that, a lot of people, it goes back to that uncertainty, the unknown, right? People want that certainty. They want that routine. They want to know that this is this is what happens every day at this time, at that time. And I personally don't live like that, because I think that, especially as a parent, I think my children will be better equipped when there's an element of, there's no routine in essence, right? Every day is different. Every day you do different things. There's no set routine. I try not to, which I hope will help them deal with life, because life is really, sporadic, and you don't know what's going to happen from one day to another, and you shouldn't know.
Yeah, exactly. It is unpredictable, and I think that's so awesome. First of all, like, in terms of parenting skills, I think that's awesome.
It's not easy.
But I think, honestly, for everyone, because I don't know where I was going to go with that. I was, like, so fueled.
I know, it's all good.
But, no, like, I get it. I got it. It's because of safety and security. Like, that's why people want routine. That's why people want the 9-to-5 job with the benefits. That's why people want X amount of dollars every year. That's why people want this. That's why people want that. And I don't operate like that, and I've had a really hard time at some points encountering a lot of close people to me that do operate in that way, and I don't.
Well, it's probably 99% of people who operate, and I've seen that, especially in terms of, people who have families, even people who have routines, where they even say, children respond better to routines. But, yeah, immediately they may. But I think in the long term, it can create anxiety, because, like I said, life can be filled with chaos. And it can be a beautiful chaos if you learn to embrace it. And again, we've all experienced, I've experienced, the chaos when you don't know what to do with it, and you get scared and you kind of dwell in it. But when you learn to kind of harness that and say, this chaos has to happen for a greater good, then, if your children are better equipped to dealing with day-to-day situations, then, that's what's going to happen when they're out there in the real world on their own independently. And it's hard to do it, but I feel like my life has just been that way.
Yeah.
So it's kind of just happened that way, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think everyone also is just on their own path. And so even though I can get really frustrated with people that are on a very different path from me and are more linear than I am, I know that they are where they need to be as well. And, there has to be that respect there, bottom line, and kind
That's
of understanding and compassion, right?
Right.
And understanding that they are where they are and I am where I am. And that is easier said than done, like, when you're not going through it. But when you are dealing with that difference,
Well, maybe that's where your music helps to bridge that gap or shine, light and directly or indirectly on people's lives to make different decisions, to live differently.
Yeah.
And like you said, everyone listens to your music, they have a different favorite song. It's all a matter of perspective. But I think that with your own personal intention and life experience, I can't imagine how that wouldn't shine through in your music. It is who you are. It's part of you, right? It's almost like your own child.
It really is.
Yeah.
I've been referring to it as my child, because it really is. Like, it has taken on a life of its own. And there honestly was a birthing process to it, because it's not just recording. There was also a lot of letting go, and I have these waiting periods like I have right now, like we were talking about earlier, like kind of these limbo periods, these lulls where you're just waiting because you just want it to be birthed already, and you just want to get it out.
Yeah.
The in-between, because it's fun to create, and it's fun to birth a project, but when you're in the in-between waiting stage, I guess it would be similar to when you're like, 8 or 9 months pregnant, totally, and you're just like, hey, is this let's go, But again, timing is everything, and I honestly felt like that in a lot of ways, because I had to have a lot of trust and patience in terms of sending out my music and waiting for it to come back, and having other musicians play on it, and also having it mixed and mastered, and then ordering physical copies of the CD. All of these things this year, I had to wait for it to come back to me. I had to let it go, and I had to let it come back and trust that it would. And invest the money in all these albums, and then trust, that it would come back, and it totally did. So it's just a really interesting process. And it's funny you said Shine, because Shine is the name of my album.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's so funny. And to be
know.
honest, I didn't know that. We're going to play one of your songs shortly, but I had no idea that was the name
So
of it.
I was like really dying there for a second.
Oh,
because,
that's funny.
Yeah.
No, I find that, it might be an extreme analogy, but I do find that anytime we manifest, that it is in comparison to conceiving a child, because it starts with an idea.
Yeah.
It starts with a seed, and then it just flourishes, and there's so much unknown, and you have to just learn to trust everything from conception to when they're, who knows how old.
It's so true.
And it's a journey, and it's a hard process, but that's, when you manifest something, you see it materialize before you. I do compare that to seeing your child born, and you're like, wow, this is from a thought to actual physical reality, and it's so surreal. So every time, something manifests in my life, it's so emotional, because I'm thinking, oh my God, like, it started with a thought, and really, we're the ones who put kind of scales on things, saying, this is small, this is medium, but really, it's the law of relativity. It's all relative, and it all just is. But for me, it's just so magical. And you mentioned something else that I just love, is that, like, that boomerang effect, where I've experienced that as well. Anything that you're passionate about, that you really put your heart and soul into, and this is hard, because sometimes you don't see the immediate result of whatever it is, if it's a project, an idea, but I believe the rule is, if you put your heart and soul into something, it will always come back to you.
Yes.
And sometimes you just have to release it, and that's hard, because you're thinking, but I really want, again, going back to it, I really want this to happen now. I'm so passionate about this, and it's not happening, and I've learned that you just have to kind of let it go, and it always finds its way back to you, and when it does come back to you, it's like so much more magical and beautiful and just enormous in terms of what you could have imagined the outcome to be, and it always, you don't know when, and you don't know how again, but it comes back.
Yeah.
And I think that I love that you feel the same way, because I've experienced that so many times.
Absolutely. I think something I always try to remind myself of is that if I really resonate with it, and I really feel that it's a part of my purpose, that it'll be supported. Mm-hmm. Because I know that it needs to happen for me, and I know that it has to happen for others. Because it is about shining. It's about shining your light, and not just for yourself, but also for so many other people. Again, like we said earlier, you don't even know the impact that you have on people. And that's something I've had to learn to trust in, is to trust in my path and what I feel guided to do. And it is tough, because I think sometimes you don't see the rewards right away. Mm-hmm. Whether it's financially, or whether it's just emotionally, or in any way, like, you have to invest and trust that it'll come back to you, and it definitely does. And I've witnessed that many times.
I know, I hear you, and I have to, and it's and I still sometimes struggle with certain things where I'm like, we put these timelines on things, or we have even, physical deadlines, and you're like, but it needs to happen by this point. And if it doesn't, we get caught on that. And I sometimes still struggle with, no, I just have to let it go. Regardless of what I see in front of me now superficially, I know it will come back to me when it needs to, because I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah. And
that's really hard. It's kind of like children, letting them go out and play, and they'll come back, but you're like, I just have to let them go, let them be, and I know that everything will be okay, and that's hard, from ideas, projects, to children.
Yeah.
It's all a challenge, I find, because it's the unknown. Again, you don't know what's going to happen, and your ego is saying you need to hold on to this in order for it to work.
You need to cling, and you need to feel some sort of security, but when you cling, it just makes things worse. So,
it does.
So this time around, I'm more conscious of that, because I feel like I've gone through, quite a few transitions, but I feel like I'm in a big transition period right now. And this time I'm conscious of how I behave, because I think the last few big transitions that I've gone through in my life, I was definitely not as consciously aware of what I was doing compared to me now, right? Mm-hmm. So, I've noticed my behavior, and I've noticed the ego, and I've noticed the wanting to cling, and the wanting to whatever, and I've definitely come to better grips with dealing with things, not just in the physical, because I think you have to really just trust on a greater level that things are working out, and even to sometimes send love from afar to certain people as well, because I think sometimes you want to really cling, and if you know that you're moving forward, you want closure, and you want a certain conversation to happen, or you want this to happen. And I've wanted a lot of things to happen before I leave so I can feel a sense of peace. And what I've realized is that it always stems from yourself and feeling inner peace. And I think that sometimes you just, you have to, sometimes you have to be loving from afar.
No, you totally, and you're right, when we put these external expectations, you know, it's almost like expectations on others. In terms of our own gratification, we can't do that because, and I mean, I get caught, I catch myself all the time, but I know, like you said, you know, as I've evolved as well, I have this greater consciousness, which has helped me in so many aspects of my life that I feel just so much more inner peace and clarity. Doesn't mean I don't go backwards sometimes, but, you know, I give myself a moment and then I'm back, but it's like you have to find your own inner peace. You can't expect other situations or other people to, you know, you can't rely on them for your own happiness.
Yes.
And that's really hard because sometimes you're thinking, well, if this happens, then I know I'll be happy. But ultimately, that may never happen. So does that mean you'll always be unhappy?
Yeah.
And it's so hard because you're sitting there thinking, and it's like this constant, I think my brain is just always having this little conversation with itself because I always analyzing these situations where it's like, well, I can't be happy if that happens because I need to be happy now, or that won't even happen. Yeah. So you're sitting there, you know, and it is, it's learning to, you know, not have expectations, even with yourself. Just be loving to yourself and the people around you, and that's hard. Depending on the situations you've encountered and stuff, that's hard. But yeah, it's having the greater consciousness of knowing you need to be that way, I think helps you in so many different ways, where you can have that conversation with yourself and say, you know what, no, I need to be at peace regardless of what's happening externally. Yeah,
and I think it's hard to sometimes be at peace because we're always so busy doing instead of being, and I think that's a huge thing just on this planet in general, is everyone's so concerned about finding world peace, but they're doing and doing and doing. And I just think about this sometimes, and it's crazy, but, you know, if we all just took a minute to think about either what we're grateful for or to feel some sort of inner peace and to be kinder to ourselves. You know, if every single person on the planet was doing that, like, think about how different the world would be, because we're so focused on external happiness and taking things from outside and trying to fill ourselves up with that. And it never works, you know.
No, it's so true, because I like your example of, you know, everyone's searching for world peace, but if you don't have inner peace, how could you have outer peace?
Exactly.
It's kind of like, if you don't love yourself, how do you expect to love others or have others love you, and so forth?
Yeah.
And it's so true, where, you know, maybe the people who are, you know, when we talk about even energy and all that, but you have to focus on yourself first before you can really be proactive in any aspect of anything. Because if you're not at peace, then how can you project peace?
Exactly. And I think, unfortunately, it comes with a lot of guilt for people. Like, I definitely take time for myself, and sometimes that means having time to rest, and people feel really guilty when they're not doing. And I think sometimes they're also, and I've done this too, avoiding something within, because if you're that busy and you can't take 2 minutes to be with yourself, it's like, well, what am I avoiding inside? Right?
So true.
Because that's where a lot of it stems from, and I see people like overly working to the point where it's not healthy at all. And I've done it. I think we've all done it, but you know,
that's so true, because I love that you brought that up, because even I always stem from my own personal examples, because I think that's really the only place I can really, you know, talk about is, but of course I've observed it in others, and the reality is you're right, when you need to take time, even just to meditate, and or even just a moment of peace within yourself. You know, I could see how sometimes I've avoided that, because you're right, I may not be able to pinpoint it, but there's something that I don't want to deal with within. Yeah. That I, you know, subconsciously am realizing that if I'm at peace, then I have to sit there and deal with whatever is going on inside. And so you avoid it, and you're right, there's that sense of guilt where, well, if I'm going to take 10 minutes to sit here and be at peace or meditate or whatever it is, then I'm not working, or I'm not doing this, and that's wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's the opposite.
I'm not working, which means I'm not bringing in money, which means I'm not whatever, which means I'm not being successful and I'm not provided for. And that, I think, is what the root issue is, that we deal with here is feeling that we're not provided for. And that is a huge thing I've worked on this year, being an entrepreneur, because, you know, I don't work a 9 to 5. My schedule is different all the time. It varies every day. It varies every week, much like your life. And I've had to trust that, you know, it's safe for me to follow my path, because even though it's different from what I see around me, I trust that I'll be provided for. And every time, you know, I haven't been let down. So
no, totally. And you know what? That's so true, because I struggled with that, you know, when I first started my business as well. And being a parent, I was stuck on, well, I'm not working, so to speak, and, you know, 9 to 5, I'm not providing for. And my ego, I just allowed that to consume me, because I was just like, you know, I'm educated, I'm talented, but I'm not providing. And something's wrong with this picture. And I dwelled in that for a long time until I somehow, you know, came to that realization that it's not about that. And once I kind of released that, then my life just kind of unfolded magically the way it should, and the way everyone's life should. But it was really hard. I won't lie, for a little bit of time I was sitting there and I really was challenged with, I'm not contributing, you know, intellectually. That was hard, until I just kind of, you know, like you said, once your back's against the wall, you can't go any further, and you can only go up.
Yeah.
And that's what I realized, is that, okay, I'm at this point, and the only way now is to progress and evolve. So I need to find the tools, the information, the knowledge, you know, emotionally, everything to move ahead. And that's when I started kind of my own personal journey of figuring out what can help me get to where I need to get. And so that was, you know, that was a great journey, because in the end, I look back and I'm very grateful for all of that.
Yeah.
Because coming to those realizations has helped me help myself, and hopefully helped others.
And that's what I was going to say next, is that I feel that people need to hear stories like ours more often, because we still have a lot of ideas of what's right and wrong. And I think even though we may be starting to be more open-minded or compassionate with the fact that we're all different and we're all on different paths and we all have different journeys and blah, 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 it's totally different when you're living in this reality, in the physical world, where people still have the idea that work means this. And if you don't fit into that mold, that means you're not working, or you're not working hard enough. And I work very hard at what I do, and I love what I do, and I definitely feel that I contribute greatly to this planet in many ways. And I allow myself to shine and to trust that I'm provided for, and that's how I operate, and that's how I work. And it's been really tough for me to deal with people that operate under, like, the typical, you know, 9 to 5.
Totally. Or even just the linear mindset where, you know, the whole providing and that whole aspect where there's a sense of security and all that.
Yeah.
And I think that does, whatever that looks like for people in terms of, you know, linear and routine, I think that limits creativity. I think that limits evolution. You know, where you see a lot of people who wait till they retire to live their life.
Exactly.
And that's
I think
that's scary.
It is. It's scary, and I think it's sad. And I also have witnessed so many people that get ill or they pass
totally
right around the time when they retire.
Actually, there's a study that demonstrates that people do tend to get ill or something, you know, biologically happens to them because they're out of their routine now. And I have to say, you know, I'm so grateful that, you know, for my journey, because I just want to live every life to its full. I don't want to wait to a certain timeline or have an expectation that at this point in time, then I'll start living my life.
Yeah.
I want to live it every day. And I struggle with that every day. It's not like you make these crazy, you know, decisions in your life or awakenings, and then life's perfect. There's still like these, you know, I sit there and I'm perplexed with so many different situations every day where I'm thinking, why am I even perplexed with this? Like, I know what I need to do, yet I'm not doing it. You know, it's not even like I have to figure out what I need to do, but I'm not, it's just so, and I find I'm even challenged with that even more, because I know better and I know more, but I'm still sitting there thinking, why am I challenged with this situation? So it's ongoing, and I think it has to be, because life is about creation and it's about that constant evolution within. And I think that the moment you decide that you know everything and you you're in that routine where you don't need to change anymore, then you pretty much have, you cease living.
Yeah, but life is all about change, right? And growth, and you're so right, and I totally agree, because I think when we're stuck in a certain routine or habit, I don't think that's healthy to be stuck in that for like X amount of time, because you're just a robot at that point, right? Like it's
the modern day zombie is what I call it. And it really, but I have to just, I love, and I know we've already talked about it, but I just want to go back to what you said about taking time for yourself every day, whether it's a moment or two, because you're right, when people can't do that for whatever reason, it's whether they realize it or not, it's because they don't want to deal with whatever is going on inside emotionally. And you know what? It's okay. And I've had, meditation experts on my show. I've had scientists on my show. And the reality is, in the end, that moment is going to help you so much. Whether it's kind of going back and feeling those emotions like you do when you sing your songs of, situations you've dealt with in the past, it contributes to your healing process again and again and again. And it's not a bad thing that you're singing a song in the past and it's bringing up all those old emotions, because you still sometimes feel those emotions. So it just continuously heals you.
Yeah.
It's almost like a therapy session where, and I hate using that, but like,
true.
Different, whatever kind of therapy it is, spiritual therapy, whatever. But when you tap back into those old emotions, it doesn't put you back. It actually sets you forward, because you're healing yourself over and over and over again. And I think that that's really important. What I do want to do is we're going to go to a short commercial, and then I really want to play one of Justine's songs. So what we'll do is we'll go to a quick commercial as we set up her song, and you'll get to hear one of her magical and beautiful songs in just a minute. So this is Quantum Love Radio, and you're going to be listening to Justine Giles, one of her songs on her album Shine. So we'll be right back. Justine Giles in her new album Shine, and that was Think of You, right?
Yeah.
All right. Absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
So awesome. It's just such a warming sound, which is awesome, because I think more people need to hear things that are going to just warm their heart and inspire them in ways that they don't know. It's the unexpected, which is awesome. We were just talking about really quickly before we kind of end, Justine was telling me that, she just kind of is following that inner voice, really, that intuition that's telling her, to go to Montreal and stuff, and we were just talking about that. And I think it's just so exciting because, we talked about this a little bit, how the unknown is scary, but when things work out and you're going in the right direction, it just flows.
Yeah.
Like there's no, when you think of situations you've gone through in your life where, for example, you're going to book a flight, you can't fly into flight, you can't fly into seat, and you're starting to get stressed out. That means you're in the wrong direction. But when things flow and you're like you said, you got a seat sale and everything's just flowing.
Yeah.
From, being accepted into, what you're going into, where you get to play for a panel of experts. Yeah, like that. It just flows. You didn't, you're just letting it be. And I think that's so important for people to realize that they're on the right path when things just flow. Almost when you sit there and say, wow, you've heard the expression, this is too good to be true, but it's not too good to be true. Yeah. That's how it should be.
And there's a difference between trying to force something to happen and working hard. And I think sometimes people put those two things together, but they're very separate, because working hard and following your path and letting things flow is one thing. Mm-hmm. But when you're stressing and straining and overworking and trying to make things happen on your time and you're trying to control, that's a totally other thing. So working hard doesn't necessarily mean it's a good thing if you have to watch what those
There's
conditions are. There's a different
perspective on it.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, because working hard, and I think everyone should work hard if they believe in something, is waking up every day, being prepared in terms of, emotionally, and saying, today I'm going to take one proactive step. I'm going to practice for yourself. I'm going to practice singing. I'm going to emotionally prepare myself for that moment when I get to shine. Literally, it's so funny that I keep referring to your CD. Yeah, I've said this so many times on my show, is that, it's kind of, and I always use the example because I find it's just such an obvious example of singer-songwriters who, every day, if you're passionate about what you're doing, every day you're waking up, you're working hard, you're taking an action step towards you don't know when you're going to have that moment in the spotlight, but every day you're preparing for it.
Yeah.
And that's what working hard is that you're being proactive, and every day you're putting like another brick on the wall. Every day you're getting up. You know, it doesn't mean you're not going to have bad days, but every day you're taking a proactive step in the direction that you want to go. And that's what hard work is. It's never just, you know, not just sitting on your couch and saying, well, I want this to happen, and I'm not going to do anything to make it happen, but I just want it to happen. Yeah. But you know, you practice, you made sure that, you know, you know, your voice was in tune. All that stuff you had to do. You didn't know for when, but you knew in your heart that at some point you'd have an opportunity to literally shine. And so, you know, here you are going towards that opportunity, and you wouldn't have gotten there without that hard work, without that dedication, and without that perseverance. And I think that's what hard work should be. Not banging on the door because it's not opening and getting frustrated. That's not hard work. That's just frustration.
Well, and you're kind of chasing your tail at that point, right? Like,
totally.
Forcing things to happen, but things like the main thing from what we've said today is, you know, things will happen when they're meant to happen. And it also takes self-care. So it's hard work and self-care, because if you're lacking one or the other, things don't really work out. And I think sometimes we neglect one or the other.
Yeah, and it's hard not to, because you get so consumed in working towards your dreams that sometimes you forget about taking care of yourself. And that's taking that moment every day, or, you know, health-wise or whatever, but you have to take that moment to live in that present state. Even though you have that end vision, you still have to enjoy every day getting to that point. Totally.
And I feel like I have to be very present and very energetically ready to shine. And I always have to, you know, really take care of myself and make sure that I'm getting enough sleep and exercise and eating properly. And I don't think that I'd be able to do what I do without that. I think maybe that's part of why I wasn't ready to release my album maybe a year ago, because self-care was very different then, and even years prior to that. And I feel like now I'm at a point where I listen to my body a lot more, and not just my intuition in terms of emotions and stuff, but I also listen to my body and what it needs for physical care as well. And that is a really important thing.
No, I think that's so important, because it's true. And that's the hard work where, you know, again, people don't realize that the emotional part is also the hard work, because you have to work on yourself in every aspect in order to get to where you want to go. Like I said, you can't just sit around and take yourself for granted, health-wise, emotionally. You have to work on that. And that's what hard work really should be. Not the other way around. Because eventually you will get to where you need to get if every day you're focused and you persevere. And I think that the focus and the persevere and the action is what makes up for the hard work. Hard work is action, perseverance. I think that it's hand in hand. Not, hard work is going against the grain.
Yeah, and I think I'm so glad that we cleared all that up, hopefully for some people today, because I think that when people are working hard, they can often neglect themselves, as we were talking about, and that's not just emotionally, but even physically, like for physical health. And I don't think that ever pays off. Like, I don't think that's ever worth any amount of money, personally.
No, totally.
Because if you don't have your health, I don't think you have very much.
No, it's true. And I think that, we've talked about this on my show, that when you don't listen to that intuitive voice, when you don't listen to what's going on within, then it manifests itself in so many different ways. And illness and disease are one of those ways. And it doesn't mean you can't go and, start a journey of, better health and healing yourself. Sometimes it's just a little bit more challenging to get there. But I think that you have to take care of yourself emotionally and physically. Yeah. And the emotion and the physical go hand in hand. And I always go back to the medicine wheel, because there's that emotion, physical, spiritual, and mind. And all that has to be taken care of, because if one's out of balance, then it affects all of them. So it's just, you have to, and that's where the hard work is, because it's not easy to sit down and take 5 minutes again and be with yourself, because that means you're going to start to, all those old emotions or whatever it is are going to start coming through, and people don't want to deal with that. And that is hard work, because you have to sit there, and the action, the perseverance, and the dedication has to be there to overcome all that.
And that's where the work has to be done. It's like you said, somewhere on the wheel there's probably work that has to be done. And you can convince yourself that you're working hard in this physical world at your day job.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're neglecting the work that needs to be done within, then you're going to run into some issues, you know what I mean?
It's so funny, yeah.
Like, I just feel that when you do your inner work, like, that work matters and it counts. And when you do that, like, I'm not saying that you only have to do your self-work and not do any other kind of work, but I think that propels you to do much better physical work in this world.
That makes sense,
Like, you have to be able to have good health and to take care of yourself in order to shine, essentially.
That's so funny that you said that, because it's true. A lot of people will consider themselves as hard workers. They go to their job, they work hard, they come home, but they never actually work on themselves, or even in working on themselves, they aren't even really doing what they're passionate about.
Yeah.
And so I think the term, the definition of working hard does have a different perspective for different people, and the true definition should really be, like I said, that dedication, the action, the perseverance in doing what you love to do. That's working hard, which I think, I think there's a paradigm shift that's occurring in our culture, and people are starting to get that.
Yeah.
But I think, and I hope that discussions like ours help bring light to that.
For sure.
So, where can people find you and purchase your beautiful music and all that?
Well, I just want to spell out my name so people know how to look it up. So on my website, it's literally my name, but people could spell it wrong.
Okay,
so
go ahead.
It's JUSTINEGILES.com. You never know. People type things in wrong, and you can end up finding someone else. I have 2 Facebook pages going, as well as 2 YouTube pages, and one is geared towards my music and one's geared to spiritual kind of things. Yeah. So you can find both on my website. So anywhere you go, just type in my name, you'll find it. And in terms of my music, that's on iTunes worldwide, so you can just type in my name anywhere and you'll find me. I'm so excited to get a copy of your CD. I think it's just beautiful music to listen to. Thank you.
In and out of my day. So it's Justine Giles, so JUSTINEGILES.
Yeah, one L.
.com. And if you have any questions for me, you can reach me at howtousethelawofattraction.biz. Again, this was Quantum Love Radio, and thank you so much, Justine, for being my guest.
Thank you for having me.
And for sharing your beautiful music. I do hope that everybody runs to their computer.
These days.
Yeah, these days. And the album's called Shine, and again, it's Justine Giles. So thank you, and we will see you again next week.